Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen. I'm joined by my usual broadcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, who played 11 seasons for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report, coming to you twice a week to talk all things hockey. And Tom, still a ways to go until the playoffs, and yet we kind of have some news.
Yeah.
Ryan Getzlaff has announced his retirement. I want to get to that, but Jack Hughes out for the season with a knee injury. The Devils weren't going anywhere, but I hate to see that happen to a young player. I like to see him pile up the points. And so let's start with Getzlaff. I guess the first thing I was struck by is, when a player of his magnitude, and what I mean by that is just a very good player, like well-known player. He had 1,000 points in 1,200 games. Won a Stanley Cup. But one thing intrigues me, and I want now that, that's one of the beauties of having a former NHL player. Is it significant that he played his entire career on one team? To me, I really like that,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure why, but I do. I like that he spent his entire career with the Ducks.
Yeah. Well, typically as a player of that stature too, it means that he's become part of the community, part of the organization. It isn't just the on-ice play; it's the leadership. The Steve Yzermans, the Mario Lemieux, the world. It's interesting too. You look at the great players like Gretzky and Messier, for instance. They moved to different teams.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's necessarily a knock on them. I guess it's just in Gretzky's case, it was different reasons along the way that he moved from team to team. But Getzlaff, I'm with you. Remember we did our mock draft many years ago.
Oh yeah.
And he was my number one centerman that I picked. I just love he's that big guy that can skate. He's a leader. He can play physical, do it all, really. I think he's kind of undervalued, really, because maybe we don't get to see him play as much because he's out in Anaheim all the time. But you see every time with Team Canada when they had a world championships or World Cups, Olympics, he was always the guy that was front and center. Yes, you had the Crosbys and all those guys, but Getzlaff was always playing a major role with those teams. So loved his career a lot. And again, we just didn't get to see him as much as some. If he'd had it played out east here, we'd probably see him more and appreciate his talents even more.
Yeah, it's funny because it's really out of your control, at least for most of your career, whether you're going to spend your entire career with one. I mean, and yet, if I see a guy who's played for 5 teams, I think one of two things. Yeah, he's kind of a mercenary, went for the dollars, or I think, well, he'd get places and then he'd wear out his welcome.
Right.
And neither of which may be true. So.
Or it could be if you're positive about it, it could be that he's such a clutch player and the playoff kind of guy that everybody wants him. Come playoff time, the trade deadline.
Well, we entered into that discussion last time about Claude Lemieux. This is a guy. I think there was a love-hate relationship with Claude Lemieux.
Yeah, definitely.
There are parts about him that people didn't like, but he won when the game was on the line. So
with Getzlaff, there's not much to hate about his game and his personality. It seems too. He's such a leader and character guy. So
Hall of Famer.
I think so. First ballot for me. I think
really.
Yeah.
So we don't hold it against him that he only scored 280 goals.
No.
Now, what do you think his face-off percentage was?
Oh, do you know it?
Yeah, I looked it up.
Okay. I'm going to say it's probably a pretty high one. What is a pretty high one? Like 60%? Is that a high face?
Yeah, Bergeron is up there. Yeah, like anything over 50 is considered good.
Right. So I'm going to go 60% for Getzlaff.
49.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm stunned by that.
Yeah.
I assumed Getzlaff was good in the face-off table.
And I would still think he is, even though I'm not doubting that number in any way. But that's when I watch him play. That's one of the strengths of his game. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting that even though he was not a point per game player, in the playoffs he was pretty close. He was like 120 points, 125 games. So he raised his level. When he played in the postseason. Let me get into a little bit more into the statistics. I'm a little less sure. I think yes for Getzlaff in the Hall of Fame, but I'm not sure. I think there'll be some debate.
Really?
Well, this is why, and it's really unfair. But when you're splitting hairs on great players, and that's what you're really doing because they're all great. And you start saying things about you want only the most extraordinary players. Well, one of the bases for comparison is awards. and Getzlaff never won any awards. But is that fair? Because only one guy can win the Hart Trophy.
Yeah, totally.
Only one guy can win.
Yeah, I agree. And I look at his body of work too. The Olympic play, on the world stage, playing for Canada all the time. Playing major roles too. He wasn't just a guy sitting on the bench. He was really somebody they counted on. So I think that's why it puts it over the top for me. All the awards and the face-off percentage, that's surprising. But yeah, I just when I think of Getzlaff, I think of a guy that is that, obviously going to the Hall of Fame right away. But that's interesting.
Yeah, he was 30 years old before he got a face-off percentage above 50%.
Wow.
And he got 50.8 on his. 29. He was 29, and he got 50.8, and then he went back down again, and then when he was 32, he was at 47.3.
Wow. Oh, that's surprising.
And then in his last 4 seasons,
right,
he's been decent. He's been 54.3, 51.3, 51.8. And you were so right. Early in his career, he was a big hitter. And then that's obviously tapered off as he's gotten older. But that really surprised me. The one thing that I think you and I will remember about him is he played a ton.
Yeah.
He was over 20 minutes per game throughout his career. Only in the last few years has he dipped below then.
And a big man that can skate too, right? I mean, he's a big body, like a Claude Lemieux kind of body out there, can skate and everything. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. I mean, I just think he, you pointed out too, like when it came time to play internationally, Ryan Getzlaff was one of the first guys who would get an invitation. He was known as a guy. So I think he will be a Hall of Famer. Right. I'm not so sure. Like I said, I'm not so sure just because you do have to split hairs there. Like I think Jeremy Roenick's a Hall of Famer, and he doesn't get a sniff.
Yeah, but Glenn Anderson was kind of in that same position too, where he ultimately got in, but it seemed like there's a real bias against him. People didn't like him more than anything. It wasn't about his play as much as
I think that's fair. They just weren't sure. Did he benefit from playing with the Oilers? And I think the Oilers benefited from having him. I mean, he was. We talk all the time now about how it's one thing to be able to skate fast, but making plays at high speed. Glenn Anderson could make plays at high speed.
And a clutch player too, like in the big game.
Big time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Overtime goals, big goals. But he had this reputation. I don't even know if this story is true, but it's been told many times about he was almost mysterious about what he did with his life. And I'd heard this story that supposedly was told about Mark Messier, that Messier had organized this golf trip with a bunch of hockey players and stuff, and they all went to, and it was some island out in the Caribbean, and they had a couple or 3 golf courses, and they had 7 or 8 guys, and they're all done golfing, and they're all just walking the beach, drinking a beer, and Messier looks up, and he goes, God, that guy looks familiar walking toward us, and it was Glenn Anderson. Yeah. And he come walking up, and he looked up at Mark and he said, "Hi, guys," and just kept walking.
Oh yeah, I've heard that story too. Yeah, and I've seen him around a lot of events. The Rangers have us alumni guys getting together, and he's a great guy, fantastic. But he's a different guy. Yeah, like having a conversation with him is different than having a conversation with him.
And I think a lot of people say that, that none of that stuff will enter into it, but it almost has to. Like you can't have robots, or a computer picking the Hall of Fame. It's got to be a gut feeling. And Harry Sinden, when I was on the committee, I've been on these committees, so I know a little bit how they work, and it's difficult, because again, these are all great players. If they've been nominated, you could make a case that they're Hall of Fame players, but not everybody can get in. So there has to be some way to. I don't want to use the word weed out, because that's really not what you're doing, because they're not weeds. But somebody's got to get cut. Yeah. So you start to saying, okay, well, what can? Well, some of them won major awards and some did not. And if you won a major award, I don't think, and I've said this to people, it's like, I don't think it should hurt you if you haven't won an award, but it should help you if you have.
Yeah, definitely. And if win multiple times too, like if you win the Norris Trophy multiple times,
right?
Then yeah, you're
right. But anyway, I was on this committee, and Harry didn't like the reference because it was baseball, and I knew Harry pretty well. So, and we laughed about it. Harry said that, yeah, and we laughed about it. But I said, look, there has to be what I call the Reggie Jackson test. You ought to be able to say their name and go, well, Hall of Famer. If you got to think about it, then maybe he shouldn't be in there.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
You should be able to say his name. Like I say Mario Lemieux. You say Hall of Famer.
Totally. It is true, like when you say Jeremy Roenick, you don't necessarily say Hall of Famer. No. You don't say not Hall of Famer.
No.
It's a guarantee. Yeah.
He scored over 500 goals.
Yeah, I know.
And he was a swashbuckling player.
Yep.
Like he was, you knew when he was on the ice.
Right. I would think what hurts him now is some of the comments and things that he said publicly after he played.
Yeah.
It hurts him. It shouldn't be that way, but that's
but that stuff enters into your thinking because you don't want a computer picking it, and so it all sort of enters in. Like you like to think you're looking at it objectively.
Right. And all the things that we should like about JR bringing life to the game. There's that one video where he was out in LA playing and he's dancing on the ice. From the marketing standpoint, wow, that's great, man. It's fun. The crowd's all excited. I mean, but from the hockey standpoint, the hockey people are going, stop.
Imagine just trying to sell the game.
I know.
Until everybody does like that. What a crime against humanity.
Terrible idea.
Yeah. I mean, that's why players didn't get paid until Bob Goodnow got called, because that's the way they thought.
Well, we talked about it last show where all the guys now doing that lacrosse play and putting it in. If they had done that when I played, we would have ran the kid. We were trying to get him.
Yeah, I started after you brought that up to me because I was really kind of surprised that you just negative about it. But people say that it's about 50-50.
Yeah,
like if guys don't like, well, that's not hockey, right. And the other guy's going, well, they just don't think of it like that. So
and I am probably 50-50 on it too. There's the old school part of me that says, no, you don't do that. That's showing up everybody on the ice. I'm going to run you, and I'm not going to make sure you don't do that again. The other part of me says the new game, the way it is now, hey, it's exciting.
The problem is the guys who, not all, but some of the guys who don't like that are the same guys think it's totally acceptable that every time somebody hits somebody, you've got to answer him back, even on a clean hit.
Yeah, that is ridiculous. That happened last night in the Ranger game with the Devils. Schneider, the young defenseman, hit somebody. I can't remember who he hit, and he had to fight right away.
Yeah.
They're scrapping in the background, aren't they?
Yeah, no, it's getting out of hand here. So I'm not sure what's going on.
They're going on. Somebody hits somebody, and they're going at it.
Yeah, they're going at it. Yeah, there could be a third man in, I think.
Yeah, see, and I almost think I know the player that's defending his teammate that got hit thinks that he is coming to the defense of his teammate, but I almost think it's a little bit of a selfish play. I would rather they say, go over to the guy that made the big hit. Like in this case, last night, Schneider for the Rangers hit somebody for the Devils. Go over to Schneider and say, listen, you're going to get it. We're coming for you later on in the game here. And then put him on notice and go get him. Don't do it right away. You take the risk. You take the risk of getting thrown out of the game, the third man in. Extra penalty.
But I don't like that. How about a little respect when a guy levels a guy with a clean hit? And I don't know. I mean, it just seems wrong that he has to pay a price for that. Like I hear you. I know what you mean. But when you're a teammate and you see your teammate get hit. Well, then why should we have hitting that? Like if it's unacceptable to the point that you think you have to answer that hit, then why do we have it?
So if I hit, I'm trying to intimidate the other team, and that's when they have intimidators on the other team that are coming over to me and trying to stop me from it. So it's about intimidation. I mean, the intimidation isn't what it was in the past, but it's still there. Right?
Yeah, this reminds me though of that conversation I had years ago with Lomas Brown and Glover of the NFL. Who stopped me because I was a hockey guy because they had seen their first hockey guy. And they couldn't believe all the pushing and shoving after the play. And someone had told them at the game that those were the tough guys. Right. And they just couldn't understand that. Because in the NFL, they said it's the exact opposite. Right. The guys that have to answer or fight, and I remember Glover, he went to put his hand down, like he said, those are the guys that can't take it. Like all they can do is fight. They can't take a hit.
Right.
You know, he
Well,
said,
but again, intimidation, fighting is intimidation too, right?
yeah,
It isn't always. Sometimes it's retaliation. Sometimes you're just plain mad. But the fighters, like you go back to the Broad Street Bullies back in the 70s,
yeah,
Flyers.
no, and
It was
I get it all and I understand it. And on some levels, I've enjoyed it through the years.
Yeah.
But I do think the NFL, like the intimidation is NFL, is you rock those guys with a hit. You rock them.
Yep.
Now, when we do that in the NHL, we want to punish that guy.
Right.
Well, you can't hit our guy,
Well, and it hasn't always been the way it is now, where it's that instant retaliation.
Right.
Used to be okay, we're coming for you. You want to do that? That's fine. We'll play that game. We're coming for you later on.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're still with the goal that you're trying to make him pay for hitting your teammate.
Yeah.
So I hear you. Then why do we have hitting? But again, the intimidation factor.
Well, but I get the intimidation, but isn't the intimidation the hitting the guy?
Yeah, no, it is. It is totally. So, but and again, you're trying. That's how we started the arms race there back in the 70s with the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah,
hitting is legal, but now you want to have players on the team that say, "Okay, hitting's legal. That's fine, but I'm going to have our own rules out here. It isn't the referee's rules; it's my rules." It's the
Well, I mean, I'm a hypocrite because I was a teenager in the 70s and I loved all that nonsense. Yeah. But I look at it now and it makes no sense to me. Like you try to hit guys and, we complain about there's no hitting. And then anytime somebody hits somebody, 8 guys come after.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I don't like that either. I think that's
it's wrong. Just ridiculous. I mean, I've seen some really clean hits when guys have laid people out and the guys were all over them. And then they feel like they got to fight.
Yeah.
Because they've been challenged, and then, then you're looking at it. And those are the fights. Mickey Redmond says nobody sits during a fight, and that's true. But people watch car wrecks too. They want to see what's going on there. So I don't know. It's complicated, and I'm a hypocrite. Over it. So
no, I'm with you. I mean, it was interesting. Doc Emmerich we've had on the show here too. He's one guy that I'm really surprised. He's that real cerebral guy, but he loved them.
He did, not anymore. But we had in the book we wrote a little bit about that. He grew up and of course loved it. He came out of the IHL, but over time, and what he doesn't like is, guys now, as he said, want to hurt you. That they, if you read his book talks about that. There were guys training with MMA fighters, and he said there's just guys before. I tell the story about Stu Grimson about Probert. First time Stu Grimson fought Probert, ran into him in a restaurant after the game, and Probert came right over to him, and Grimson thought, "Oh my God, I'm going to have to fight him in the restaurant," and Probert stuck his arm out. He goes, "Hey, pretty good scrap, Stu." And I don't think it's quite like that as much anymore.
No. Yeah, I mean, it's just the I don't want to say character because I don't want to say the players today don't have character, but it was just
they do. Yeah. Well, we just kind of have gotten away from the idea of 2 guys dropping their gloves and stuff, and it's more like I said, fighting wasn't intimidation to be sure, but now, and we're complaining about no one's hitting. Well, why would anybody hit when you're going to have to face an onslaught? If you do hit somebody,
So let's think back. One of the greatest hitters ever, Scott Stevens. So if he was playing today and played like he played back then,
he'd constantly be in a fight because every time he decked somebody would be on him.
Yeah, I know.
So when nobody came after Scott Stevens. Now, saying all that, he was a ferocious fighter. So, but I remember the big hit in the playoffs of the year that the Devils won a cup in the shortened season. He flattened Getzlaff, and he paid no price for that.
Yeah, I know. I remember them yapping. They should have had the camera on him. They were yapping at him from the bench, and all he had to say was, "I think it was Dino Ciccarelli.
You're next."
Yeah, you're next. Exactly.
Yeah. That's what he said. Right. Totally. They all did, but they had guys on that team that could have, and they didn't. Totally. First of all, it was clean hit. Well, maybe not by today's standards. Now I don't know. It was a high as I recall, but
a lot of headshots. A lot of his hits were right on the chin. Do you remember Paul Correa? They hit Paul Correa in the playoffs.
Yeah.
That was a late hit. And you're right, nobody came after him. Well, maybe they came after him a little bit, but
and it's it's so complicated. I mean, it really is. I mean, I've listened to people try to determine like the way it should be done, and you don't want to take physical play out. I don't mind two guys.
I think to me, if I'm a coach, I'm saying to my players, listen, I don't want you taking the extra 2 minutes. Susan pointed out here in the game last night with the Devils and the Rangers that the player Sharagovich came after him, took a 2-minute penalty, and he got hurt, and the Rangers scored on that 2-minute penalty. So I want to say to my team, say, okay, listen, I think it's great that you want to stick up for your teammate, but let's be smart about this. Let's not like right at the time that it happens, big hit, everybody in the building, all the referees, everybody's staring at that play. Right. So you go over there to initiate something. It's obvious you're going to get the extra penalty. Right. Yeah. So I say, wait, I'm not saying don't.
Yeah. Gordie Howe. That's Gordie Howe. And Stan Mikita used to tell me that, one time Gordie Howe waited 4 years until he got him back. Yeah. And he was famous for that. The famous broken jaw, J.C. Tremblay, I've told that story on this program, but that was over what J.C. Tremblay had said to him, Gordie Howe, during a bridge game on a train that both the Red Wings and Montreal Canadiens were on. Right. And that was paid back 2 seasons later. Right. So he had a mental notebook. But Mikita said it was 4 years. 4 years before. And he said, and Gordie said, we're even after he. Because Stan Mikita, he was a lady binger late in his career, but he was a feisty son of a gun.
I remember that, the change in him. That's rare that a player changes like that, right? I mean, you get that reputation.
Yeah. Well, there's the hypocrite in me talking again. Yeah. I remember, Brian Bugsy Watson. We lost him just not long ago.
That's right,
checking Bobby Hull, and Hull to the point wouldn't say Brian Watson's name. And, the reporters always would ask him about him. And I remember trying to talk to him about Bugsy Watson, do a story long after Bobby had retired. And he says he's already got enough publicity off of me, from checking him and bugging him. And, I think Bobby took a swing at him a couple of times.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. The Rangers had a great player like that, too. He wasn't quite the irritant, but, boy, he climbed in your back pocket. Jan Eriksson.
Yeah.
He would get in your pocket and follow you around.
Fantastic teammate, both on and off the ice. One of the best teammates I ever had. Great guy, real level-headed guy, but always show up, play no matter what the situation. He wasn't a fighter at all, but he'd go into Philly and do his job. And, you're right. People get mad at him because he just wouldn't quit. He was always that.
Oh, he was always like you couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah, totally.
He was and I always think of that scene from the movie Hoosiers when Gene Hackman tells his guy, you should be so close to him that you know what the brand of chewing gum he's thinking. And then at one point at the end of the movie, as he comes off the court, he says, "It's beach nut, coach."
Yeah, that's right. That's good. I love that part. That's good.
Well, you could say that about the Esa Tikanens of the world. Do you remember in the playoffs when Esa Tikkanen was checking it was the Oilers versus Bruins, checking Janney. He was shadowing him. Yeah. And I remember Janney basically raised the white flag. Like he essentially said, I can't get anywhere. Wow. This Tikkanen's all over me, and he essentially said Tikkanen was cheating because, he was hooking and holding and, he wouldn't have the puck. And I'm thinking, Craig, I wouldn't admit that if I were you, because that's part of it.
When I was out in L.A., Mike Allison was on the team too, and we played together here in New York, and we played together in L.A. And Robbie Ftorek was our coach. We played Pittsburgh one night in L.A., and he wanted Mike Allison to shadow Mario Lemieux. So Lemieux was smart. As the puck was in his zone, he just come and stand by me at the point. So then Mike Allison was standing there with Mario Lemieux. We finally had to go to Robbie and say, Robbie, listen,
it's not working. Yeah.
It's not working. You got to just let us defensemen try to take care of
it. Yeah, they Tarasov, the great Russian, came over and talked to Scotty Bowman about that, and Scotty started utilizing that a little bit. And Guy Lafleur would simply stay like way out of the play, and so instead of being a 5-on-4 power play, it was 4-on-3. Yeah. And everyone knows. I mean, there's more room. You got, it's funny though. This brings up a good point. I'm going to get away from this now. We should move off this anyway, but back in the 80s when you were playing, like 4-on-3, it looked like there was so much room out there. Yeah. But that 3 is so tight.
Yeah.
Like I'm watching it now, and it's almost like they've shrunk the ice.
I
Like
know.
there's
Yeah.
far less room on a 4-on-3 than there used to be, and it's just the tightness of that. Like they're
Well,
all they're
Yeah, and I think better skaters too, right? I mean, a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
times the three guys you'd have on the ice would be more defensive defensemen like me. We weren't the best skaters. Now they're all good skaters, right? So,
right. So they're on you quicker.
yeah,
But it's so tightly packed.
yeah,
And the other thing too is there's a real shot blocking used to be courage when I first started covering the league. That's all it was.
yeah,
Are you willing to drop down and block that shot? Now it's an art form.
yeah.
I mean, the guys that they spin and they got their body all spread out,
Right.
so it might hit something. They're like goalies.
Yeah, I know. And the equipment's different too, right? You feel braver out there because you got better equipment too. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Hey, I felt pretty brave yesterday. I mentioned you before the show. We had a really interesting panel discussion. I was on with a bunch of lawyers up in Toronto on Zoom. They were talking about the comparison between lawyers and the NHL players and what they go through, stress and all that kind of stuff, and substance abuse. And Chris Nyland was on the panel. And it's the first time I'd ever spoken to him. He was with the Rangers after I'd gotten traded. So I knew guys like Greshner who had played with him, always talked about him. But he was incredible. Really interesting story. He was very open about his drug addiction, how bad he got with heroin, his upbringing and all that kind of stuff. And it was really very interesting, really good speaker. And like you said, man, he throws it all out there. He doesn't hide anything. So really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think that's almost part of recovery now, isn't it? And most of the programs is just, sort of admitting your, what you went through and,
and you're right. He was very open about that. That listen, he had a disease or has a disease, and he really, like I said, I don't mind talking about it because he was so open with it. I think he wants to get the story out there. Talked about how at the end he was laying in a hotel room on the floor in the bathroom, just crawl up like a little baby crying, and that's when he finally reached out and got help. A big part of the discussion was reaching out and getting help when you've got an addiction, and how people like the lawyers or the athletes, it's almost like the perception is that it's a weakness if you ask for help, and how far he had to go, how down low he had to get before he finally reached out and got help.
Yeah, I mean, they say you have to bottom out, and that isn't just true of athletes. That's true of everyone. So,
right. Vegas Golden Knights are now out of the playoffs again. They're going back and forth with Dallas.
Yeah, I ran into a guy in the press box yesterday. I don't think I should say who it was, but it's a scout, and he had seen Vegas. Huh? And I asked him how Eichel was playing, and he said actually quite good. And he brought up that he thinks Eichel's on a mission that he wants to prove. For the lack of,
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah, he just said he thinks that if they don't get in, it's not going to be Jack Eichel's fault.
Right.
He said he's playing really, really hard. He just said, they've lost so many guys. Like they still don't have Riley Smith or Pacioretty or Stone. Like you said, those are big time players.
I was going to say those could be three top forwards on most teams, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So he just said, so if they get in, but we used to say that about the Devils in the 90s. If they get into the playoffs, they could win.
Right.
And they weren't always like the Devils in that era weren't designed to win, division championships. They were just a gritty, we'll win it in the postseason, type thing. So I think that's good. Buffalo won again, but and this is another point where I think you should address this as a former player. I've always been fascinated by when it's all said and done, when most of it's already been decided, the exit polling has been done. We kind of know who's going to win the election.
Right.
All of a sudden, there'll be a team, and all of a sudden, they start really playing well. The Buffalo Sabres are that team now. They are really playing well. They beat Carolina again. They were, I think, 7-3 in their 10 before that. So now they've in their last 11, I think they must be 8-3 or similar record. Anyway, they're playing very, very well.
Right.
What do we make of that? Should we be impressed, or is it just, it just doesn't matter? So now they're.
Well, I guess it's why and how your team is made up, right? If it's a bunch of young players that have the ups and downs that young players have, then I think it matters. And you say to yourself, okay, here's our young guys showing you what they can do. And I wonder sometimes, too, do the coaches coach differently? Do they put players on the ice differently? Sometimes if it's a close game and you're battling for a playoff spot still, Do you go with that veteran player because you think he's got, he's the guy that can do it. He's got more experience. And then when you're out of it, then you say, listen, I'm going to play everybody. And all of a sudden, these young kids now are starting to get more ice time. And they're good young players, and they start to play better. I mean, is it also the other team playing against you takes you for granted a little bit? As much as coaches can walk in the room all they want and say, listen, guys, we're playing Buffalo tonight. They're playing well. But the players are still like, it's Buffalo. They're not that good. Right. I mean, I've been in the locker room that happens. So, as much as you may say to yourself, okay, yeah, we got to get up for it. Inside, you're not like if we were going into the Philadelphia Spectrum, there was no nights like that. You always had to be up to play against the Flyers. But, sometimes not the same way.
Yeah. The Flyer fan base is really challenging, I think. Were there buildings where you just hated dealing with the fans because they were just.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like they hated the Rangers. They were extra bad against us. I went in there with the Kings. It was a whole different story. I joked we had played the outdoor alumni game 7 years ago when the Rangers were down in Philadelphia playing the outdoor game the night before, and there's 45,000 people in the building or the stadium. And we were all laughing before we went out there. They're not going to yell at us now, are they? They're not going to call us all those old names they called us before. We went out there and started walking. You get the long walk from the locker room out to the ice surface in those outdoor games. We're walking there. Laidlaw, you suck. Your mother sucks. Your dog sucks. It was an alumni game, for God's sakes, and they're still yelling at us. So I think it was just a hatred for the Rangers more than anything. The funny thing, I've told the story too. Dave Brown, the big tough guy with Flyers. When he's playing against the Rangers, and he's going after everybody, he's cross-checking everybody in the head and all that kind of stuff. And I go in there with the Kings and lined up for a face-off, and he comes over beside me. And I'm thinking, oh, here we go. Because, I'm just used to him doing something every shift. And he leans over to me, Tommy, how you doing? How are you like LA and everything? He's talking to me like the nicest guy in the world. I was going, it's just the Ranger thing. They just hate the Rangers. So,
it is amazing how fandom has become. And it's kind of gotten vicious.
Yeah.
These are two things that I have seen. I witnessed with my own eyes. I knew I was walking to the game in both instances. And it was the Stanley Cup final between Chicago and Philadelphia. What year was that? 2010?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So I'm walking in, and there's a guy wearing a Chicago Blackhawks jersey.
Right.
And he must be 35, 37, looks like an insurance salesman or an accountant,
right.
And he's with his 10-year-old son. And he's walking up to the arena, and there's some guys who appeared like they had started the drinking early that day. And there were 4 or 5 of them. And they started, haranguing him a little bit. And he just kept walking. He was with his son. And so one of them went on, and it was like watching a 1950s Bowery Boys. A guy goes and he puts his foot in front of him, and the guy behind him pushes over. The guy goes splat on the cement. His face is all stained up. There's a police officer standing, 7, 8 feet away, standing there.
Right.
And he looks up and laughs.
Oh, really?
Laughs.
Oh, wow.
The guy gets up, dusts himself off, gets his sons, come on, as he said, and he just kept going. Now, proper response from him. There would have been no, trying to escalate that in that situation, especially when he got no, not even a "Are you okay?" from the cop, who thought it was pretty funny.
Wow.
Yeah. So I saw that, and then the other one I saw was in Pittsburgh, of all places.
Really?
I'm not really. To be honest, I've always loved Pittsburgh. It's one of my favorite cities. I go there. I've been treated very well there. I'm always on the radio show. I like Pittsburgh people. But this shocked me. I'm walking over from that hotel right across from the arena, and there was an old gentleman, and says not a guy who's now old himself.
Experience.
Yeah. And he was walking. He was with his wife, and it was. I don't even remember now. I should, but I don't remember what jersey he was wearing. But it was whatever it was. It was a playoff game. It was the spring. And people just lined up and insulted him as he walked into the thing. Like it was embarrassing. I mean, like I wanted to say, what's wrong with you people? This guy was just coming to the game with his wife,
Think about the logic behind it too. Like, what are you proving or what are you getting done?
I don't get it. Now, there are some levels of taunting that I have great memories of. The first outdoor game in Buffalo,
right,
in that stadium, as I'm walking up, and it was cold, and it was about to snow, and everybody was all bundled up, and they were all lined up. There was the Penguins fans and the Sabres fans, and it was they were just tossing insults across, like as people were walking between them, like it was no man's land. They were just taunting him from the other thing, and everybody was laughing. It was just a great time, Yeah, I mean, it was in good fun.
My parents came down to a game in Philadelphia one time. So my mother's this tiny woman, like 5'1", and somebody started yelling. They didn't people around didn't know that was my mother, and somebody started yelling something about me. My father's a big man; he's like 6'4", but there's obviously a lot of people. He's one of the few Ranger fans. My mother stood up and started saying something to the guy that was yelling at me. My dad's like, "Can you please sit down?" But she wasn't going to let anybody yell at her son. It was pretty funny. He told me the story after. It was good.
Yeah. The one thing that also bugs me is you see it on social media all the time. If someone makes a mistake on the athletic field, they call them a moron or what an idiot. And I'm going, really?
I know.
So you've never made a mistake, and is that a reflection of your intelligence? Yeah. And it's not enough to just point out someone's flaws now. You have to eviscerate them. It's just really out of hand. I'm not sure how we got to this point.
It's social media is awful, right? Everybody's so brave on social media.
Oh, I know.
Text messages and emails. These people say things to each other. God, I mean, I've made the mistake too, but
I'm really surprised that we haven't had an athlete that has been hurt because of something, because people get so worked up. I've seen someone write that the worst thing you could be in all of sports is a kicker for a college or a pro team, because you've missed a field goal at an inopportune time, and you're just and they end up. I knew a writer who's they didn't like what he wrote, and so people ganged up and they got Google Maps of his home. They published his address. They got his children's emails and thing, and they just went after him.
Wow.
And this went on for 2 or 3 weeks, and then until they had enough, and that was done. Well, if they're doing that to a writer, imagine what they're doing to an athlete.
I know. I hear some of these stories about these college kids that are kickers and they miss a big kick. It's like we've lost. We talked about this before. Maybe it was always this bad. Maybe social media has brought it to light more. It's just you lost that compassion for anybody else, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And this may have been going on forever. You just didn't have any means of it becoming public, and because I remember used to have arguments about sports, but it seemed like it was always fun. When you were 7 or 8, you'd argue whether Superman and if Superman and Batman fought, who would win. And then, one of the things I remember is there was this one kid and they would be arguing back and forth. And I said, what are you talking about? Like, Superman has superpowers. And then one kid would say, yeah, but if Batman just had kryptonite in his pocket at all times, it's over. And then the other kid would go, yeah, that's a good point.
I remember my father was a big Green Bay Packer fan, so I cheered for the Dallas Cowboys back then because they were the big rivals. So it was a fun thing. We'd sit there and watch the games.
Oh, absolutely. And it was a lot of and the other thing too is, and you see it now reflected in some of the older movies if you watch them, where the guy would say, the umpire's a bum. But it was laughable. So
empathy. That's my word. She gets little digs in there once in a while too. That's good. I told you that's empathy is the key word. When I was on Survivor, they do all the psychological testing on you, and then you go from casting out to Los Angeles. At the end of the week, they bring you in and they give you the results of the testing. And the female doctor looked at me and goes, Tom, you have a hard time with empathy. And I swear, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, do I even know what the word means? I wasn't quite sure. I tried to trick her to tell me what the word meant. I said, so what's your definition of empathy? And she started laughing at me. She says, you don't even know what it means. So I've learned to be empathetic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember talking to you about that at the time of that, because that's to me, that's a harsh charge. and I've known you for a long time, and you care about the people you care about.
Yeah.
Which to me is what's most important.
Right.
As long as you care about your family and your friends, if you're one of the people, then you're not a person who lacks empathy. Now, some people are empathetic toward everything,
Right.
and that's why we have liberals and conservatives.
Yeah. Well, and empathy is more like it's feeling bad about the person's situation, right? It's like, oh, I'm here for you, or whatever.
Sure.
More if somebody comes to me, they've got a problem, I feel bad for them, but I'm also like, okay, let's go help them fix the problem. Let's get it solved. I guess not everybody.
Yeah.
Like there's a funny video, and this woman sitting on a couch, and they don't show her full face. It's a public service announcement, and she's complaining to her boyfriend or her husband about, oh, I feel terrible, my headaches, the stress is terrible, and he's sitting there looking at her like of course you got it. So now they show her whole face, and she's got a nail in her forehead. And he's looking at her, and he knows that he should not say it's because, honey, you've got a nail in your forehead, but he can't help himself. He finally says to her, he says, well, it's because you got a nail in your forehead. And she says, like, you're always doing that. You're always trying to find the solution. It's like that old thing. It's hilarious. I'll send it to you. It's a hilarious video. And then she's talking about, then he calms down. He says, okay, honey. And he's trying to be calm. And she says, oh, my sweaters are always getting snagged. And you can see the fumes are just building up and everything because he knows the solution. Just get rid of the nail, but he can't say it to her anymore. So
I can definitely see that. Well, anyway, we've run out of allotted time. We started out good, and we right into hockey, and as usual, we've been wayward in our discussions. But we were empathetic. That's for sure. Anyway, but if you want to read me about hockey, because I do write about it quite a lot,
very well.
DetroitHockeyNow.com and also HockeyBuzz.com.
And if you want to hear about empathy again on this show, you can go to radio.co at 365 Sports. Again, that's radio.co at 365 Sports. Saying goodbye for Mr. Empathy himself, Mr. Kevin Allen. We'll see you guys next week.